Okay. Since it's the National Library Week, you may have to suffer through a few of my commercials. Sorry about that. The struggle for freedom of expression is as ancient as the history of censorship. Censorship comes from the Latin word censor. A censor was the official responsible for conducting the Roman census, the official count of people and property. The position, created around 443 BC, also included such responsibilities as awarding state contracts for building roads and public buildings, collecting taxes, and supervising public morality. They had enormous power and could remove any member of the Senate for violating Roman laws or for exhibiting questionable moral conduct. Interesting aspect, isn't it? One major event of censorship in ancient China was the burning of books and supposedly the burial of scholars in 2021 BC. I think he even buried them alive.
Oh.
This was done by the Emperor Qi Shi Huang Di. I'm sure I spelled that right. His reasoning was to restrict intellectuals from questioning the power of his dynasty. China has continued to become more government controlled, as evidenced by the Tiananmen Square, censorship of the internet, and the subjugation of the, how do you say that word? The Muslims, the Uyghur Muslims. Sorry, I have my little coach here beside me. Perhaps the most famous case of censorship in ancient times is that of Socrates. He was sentenced to drink poison in 399 BC for denying the gods recognized by the state, introducing new unorthodox divinities, and also for corrupting youth. In 387 BC, Plato advocated that Homer's The Odyssey be expurgated for young readers. In his Republic, he said, "It is not our business to invent stories, but only to be clear as to the main outlines to be followed by the poets in making their stories and the limits beyond which they must not be allowed to go." This ancient view of censorship as a benevolent test in the best interests of the public is still upheld today in many countries. The Soviet Union adhered to that philosophy and had the longest lasting and most extensive censorship of the 20th century. In 325 AD, Thalion, a poetic expression of an unorthodox view of the nature of Christ, was banned by the Catholic Church. The Council of Nicaea also exiled the book's author, Arius. The church was at the center of book banning for many centuries, and the Bible itself was the center of much controversy. For instance, the first English translation of the Bible, made by William Tyndale in 1525, was damned as pernicious merchandise by the clergy. Tyndale was burned at the stake in 1546, and at 1555, all of his books were banned by Queen Mary for being against the Catholic faith. In 1559, Pope Paul IV issued the first Index Librarium Prohibitorum, a specific list of books that the Catholic Church prohibited Catholics from reading. Excuse me. Many of the books were banned because of their heretical or ideological dangerous content, as determined by the Catholic Church. All of the works of some authors, such as Galileo, Thomas More, Thomas Hobbes, Emile Zola, Jean-Paul Sartre, were banned. Many classics, including John Milton's Paradise Lost, The Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire by Edward Gibbon, Voltaire's Candide, Pierre Larousse's Grand Dictionary, The Principles of Political Economy by John Stuart Mill, and Immanuel Kant's Critique of Personal Reason, just to name a few. In 1949, the list still had 255 titles on it. Finally, in 1956, Pope Paul VI terminated the index. In my elementary school, I still remember the nuns referring to the index, but we, of course, never had any of those books in our very small school library, so I didn't have to worry about offending. With the invention of movable type by Johannes Gutenberg in 1439, the printing of books exploded, and soon the Catholic Church and the universities found the output of books beyond their control. In 1501, Pope Alexander VI issued a papal decree against unlicensed printing, which included the principle of censorship. Between 1524 and 1548, the Imperial Diet of Germany drew up various stringent regulations, and in 1535, Francis I in France prohibited the printing of books under the penalty of death. This was deemed too severe, and shortly afterward, the Sorbonne was given the right of deciding what could be printed. This system lasted until the French Revolution in 1789. Censorship was either restrictive or corrective. It restricted publications or enforced penalties after publication. In England and other countries, regulation of printing was under the responsibility of the government. Because Native American cultures were not understood and often viewed as pagan, they suffered greatly from censorship. One of the great tragedies of the Mayan culture is the burning of the Mayan codices in 1562. When the Catholic priests from Spain encountered the Mayans, they attempted to convert them. And when they refused, they burned in many of their codices containing history and much scientific information. The priests wanted to erase from their minds their ancient beliefs and traditions, which obviously they did. In the 17th and 18th centuries, individual rights, dignity, and liberty became political issues, subsequently protected by laws in many countries. Sweden abolished censorship and introduced a law guaranteeing freedom of the press in 1766. Denmark and Norway followed suit in 1770. In 1789, the French National Assembly stated, "The free communication of thought and opinion is one of the most precious rights of man. Every citizen may therefore speak, write, and print freely." The First Amendment of the US Constitution, adopted in 1787, excuse me, it guarantees the freedom of speech and the press, and it is regarded as the root of comprehensive protection of freedom of expression in Western countries. It is a fundamental right, unless apparently you write a book that some people disagree with. On May 10th, 1933, one of Western civilization's saddest, most frightening days occurred. That's the date that the newly empowered Nazi Party led a wholesale literary immolation participated in by university students and broadcast on the radio stations throughout Germany. It was at the square of the Berlin Opera House. Some 25,000 volumes of books deemed un-German were incinerated in an eerie, foreshadowing attempt to extinguish the authors and ideas they represented. The German author Heinrich Heine, who warned that the burning of books would end in the burning of humans, was right, as proved by the Nazi Germany's gruesome mass extermination of people. The immolation included books about communism or pacifism, literature seen as questioning German culture or racial superiority, and material deemed sexually explicit went up in smoke. As of course, anything written by Jews or anti-Hitler dissidents. However, public opinion, public concern for alleged offensive speech and writing still exists today. Though book banning as we know it today primarily focuses on attempts to keep certain works, mostly of fiction, out of the hands of children and young adults, the first recorded of censorship in colonial America focused on religious and political texts deemed too dangerous for the general public, such as The New English King by Thomas Morton, William Pynchon's The Meritorious Price of Our Redemption, and The Christian Commonwealth by John Eliot. This form of censorship continued in the US throughout the 17th, 18th, and 19th centuries. In 1852, Harriet Beecher Stowe's Uncle Tom's Cabin, an international bestseller, was banned in the southern US for being abolitionist propaganda. It is frequently challenged today. The Comstock Act of 1873 made it illegal to send obscene, lewd, or lascivious, immoral, or indecent publications through the mail. The law also made it a misdemeanor for anyone to sell, give away, or possess an obscene book, pamphlet, pictures, drawings, or advertisement. In addition, it included writings or instruments pertaining to contraception and abortion, even if they were written by a physician. It didn't, however, provide a definition of obscenity. Individuals convicted of violating the Comstock Act could receive up to 5 years of imprisonment and hard labor and a fine of $2,000. In 1963, the courts overturned the contraception provision as a result of Margaret Sanger's lobbying. What is book banning? It often begins with a parent, organizations, or community groups that decide that a certain book should not be accessible to the public or a certain group. It usually starts with a challenge to whatever organization has the item, usually a public or school library. Most libraries and schools have a request for consideration form and a procedure for reviewing that request. Many times a committee is called upon to evaluate the book and make a recommendation to the governing body. In Hastings, the public library and Hastings Public and Academic, start over here. In Hastings, the public library and Hastings Public and Adams Central Schools have such forms, policies, and procedures. During my time at the public library, we had several objections to books, often children's books. I or the children's librarian visited with the person calmly, respectfully, and courteously, and explained why the book was chosen. If they wanted to pursue the matter, they were then offered the request for consideration form. Oftentimes, they didn't want to fill out the form, so the matter was dropped. As I recall, we did have one objection that went through the whole process. A committee was formed, a committee of library board member from the public school, Hastings College, the media, and the community at large. A library staff member was an ex officio of the committee. Judy Standine actually was on that committee. The committee met, read, and reviewed the book and presented the report to the library board. The library board voted to retain the book. I don't now remember what the book was. Sorry about that. Throughout the years, we often found special interest books in the children's libraries that were misshelved. 613.9 books, area for sex, could be found anywhere else, hidden under sofa cushions or in the science or history areas. Kids wanted and needed the information, but they didn't want to check it out so that their parents could see it. A book is banned only if it has been removed. Is it legal to ban books? Removing books from public libraries based solely on their content can be considered censorship and a violation of the First Amendment. The US Supreme Court has held repeatedly that students have a right to free speech, and it is against the First Amendment for public schools to remove books because of their content. Vera Eidelman, attorney for the ACLU, stated, "It is a violation of the First Amendment for the government to ban books merely because it dislikes ideas contained in those books, nor may it do so for partisan, political, or viewpoint-based reasons. It is the rights of individuals to read about a wide range of viewpoints, genres, and experiences. It is not the role of a free, democratic government to dictate what citizens may read and think." Why do people attempt to ban books? Because they believe that it contains inappropriate material, at least according to them. The criteria, wait a sec, sorry, they just do that. Many groups today are forming to get books banned, though sometimes even legislatively. A couple examples. In December 2021, an Oklahoma state senator, Rob Standridge, introduced legislation that would allow parents to ban books in Oklahoma public schools. It would also set a $10,000 bounty to be collected by parents for each day a challenged book remains on the shelves. One of Standridge's proposed bills would prohibit school libraries from having or promoting books that addressed gender identity, sexual orientation, or books that contained content of a sexual nature that a reasonable parent or legal guardian would want to know about or approve of before their child was exposed to it. Parents believing that a book violates the bill may demand school officials remove it within 30 days. If a book is not removed during this time, the school employees tasked with getting rid of it will be terminated, subject to due process, of course, and they will be prohibited from working at another school for at least 2 years. Parents may see monetary damages, according to the bill, including a maximum of $10,000 for each day that the challenge book is not removed. Under Standridge's bill, second bill, he has a second one. Universities in Oklahoma beginning in 2020 would be prohibited from requiring students to enroll in courses addressing any form of gender, sexual, or racial diversity, equality, or inclusion curriculum, which falls outside their course requirements for their major. Luckily, as of February 4th, 2020, the bill had no sponsors and has been referred to the Oklahoma Senate Education Committee. And I think we all know about this one. In Tennessee, a school board voted to withdraw Maus, the Holocaust graphic novel by Art Spiegelman, because it portrays Jews as mice and Nazis as cats, and recounting the author's parents' experience during the Holocaust. Supposedly it contained inappropriate curse words and a depiction of the naked character. Maus is a story centered on Jews, told in the Jewish way, in which there's horrible violence. There's no redemption, there's no salvation. There's only a story so tellable, so terrible, that it has to be told, and the need to remember. People like this school board are perfectly comfortable teaching the Holocaust as long as it isn't too violent or too sad. Spiegelman's response to the whole issue was, it's a disturbing history. Teachers and librarians are trained to teach children about difficult subjects in age-appropriate ways, and that removing books from school libraries or curricula only robs children of the opportunity to understand history, even when that history is upsetting. It may not be a pretty time in our history, but you learn from history. This is Pat Scales. She's the author of Teaching Banned Books and a past president of the Association for Library Service to Children, a division of the American Library Association. The importance of learning history is so that we can equip ourselves for not allowing it to happen again. Scales also adds that failing to teach stories that give insight into the lives of people of color, Jews, LGBTQ students, and others takes away the opportunities to learn about and empathize with other people. That's exactly what a 17-year-old Amanda Jennings, a senior at San Antonio's Ronald Reagan High School, was concerned about when she spoke about removing books at a school board meeting in December. She argued that learning about the experiences of other people makes students more empathetic and less likely to do or say harmful things to others, adding, "You'll be able to realize where someone else is coming from." To these parents concerned with such discussions that will make their white children feel guilty or discomforted, Emily Knox, author of the Banning Books in the 20th Century America, asks that they consider the point of view of children of color. What does that say to these children? That adults in the community feel like your own history is too painful to be taught to other children. It's a history that you know was painful, but these other adults seem to think that their children shouldn't know about it or that it should be sanitized in some way. Often, when a book is banned, it instantly becomes a bestseller and is sold out in many bookstores. Reading a banned book may also be an opportunity for the parent and the child to discuss the book. Certain topics are always hard to talk about with children, regardless of the parent's political views or values. Parents can help their children navigate these hard to understand, sometimes uncomfortable themes that might come up after reading the book. When a tough topic comes up, parents can start by asking kids what they already know or think about a topic to gauge how much information or misinformation the child has. Jessica Willen, assistant professor of the Child Study Center at Yale School of Medicine, says, it's also okay to admit that you yourself don't know, adding that it can be an opportunity for parent and child to learn together. Parents should also do their homework on tough topics, both to shore up their knowledge, as well as to examine their own emotions and potential biases. Ultimately, the more informed you are, the more comfortable you'll be at having these conversations with your kids. The American Library Association has been listing banned books for decades. In 2021, they tracked a total of 729 challenges to library, school, and university materials and services in 2021. It targeted a total of 1,597 books. Some of the books frequently banned are, and note please the reasons, Brown Bear, What Do You See? By Bill Martin Jr. It's a children's book about teaching children about colors and animals. In 2010, the Texas Board of Education banned it because they thought that the author, Bill Martin, who wrote this book, was the Bill Martin who wrote Ethical Marxism. Actually, he was no relation. Charlotte's Web, perennial favorite by anyone, adult or child. And it was banned because it is unnatural for animals to talk, and shows that the lower forms of human uh, of life, of human abilities, and it's sacrilegious and disrespectful to God. Crazy. The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn by Mark Twain, because of racial insensitivity and language. This is probably not some nice language. Where's Waldo? Oh, that's a crazy book. It's a book that challenged the reader to find Waldo in chaotic scenes. And if you've ever read it, you're just kind of going crazy with it. But actually, on page 4, there's a bare-breasted woman in a beach scene. Sorry, I missed that first time through. With the picture so small, you can hardly notice that at all, but obviously someone found it. This shouldn't be on the shelf. Okay. The Diary of a Young Girl by Anne Frank. And this is banned because passages that depict her emerging sexual desires. Boy, you really have to stretch for some of these reasons. One of my favorite books, The Light in the Attic, which is on the shelf behind me here, it's by Shel Silverstein. It's a book of silly and humorous poems. My kids loved it. And it encouraged children to, and this was banned because it encouraged children to break dishes so they wouldn't have to dry them. And it also had some poems that glorified Satan, suicide, and cannibalism, and encouraged children to disobey. Gosh, the stuff that people can read into some of these innocent little poems. Another one of my favorites, Stragonona, and I may have to show you this book. Oh, there she is. Stragonona. Oh, love it. It's by Tommy DiPaolo. And he inscribed this book to my children, Jason and Michelle, with love and 3 kisses from Stragonona. It's just one of my kids and our favorites. Apparently, her pasta pot kept producing pasta after her magic words. And of course, magic. Well, we shouldn't tell kids about magic. Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret by Judy Blume, because it talks about puberty, sexuality, and menstruation. Duh. We shouldn't talk about those things, should we? And this is a book for kids. Judy Blume was often censored. Blubber, also by Judy Blume. It deals with bullying and cliques. Oh, wow. Tough subjects. But she explains in the book that how to deal with it, and that people should not be bullied. Oh, The Grapes of Wrath by John Steinbeck, because it uses the name of God and Jesus in vain. And also because of a young minister who told how he took advantage of a young woman. Great. It was also banned because it didn't depict Oklahoma in a good light. Slaughterhouse 5 by Kurt Vonnegut. This book was actually burned in Drake, North Dakota in 1973. Objections were about that it was rife with profanity and explicit sex. I could go on for hours and describe many of the books on the table behind me, which are all banned books, and I've read many of them, either before or after this, or will be reading them. But like Representative Jamie Raskin recently said, if we cancel or censor everything that people find offensive, nothing will be left. Also, in case you missed this item on today's news, this comes from Reuters. Sharon Bernstein wrote it. More than 1,000 book titles addressing racism and LGBTQ issues have been banned from US classrooms and school libraries in the last 9 months, many under pressure from conservative parents and officials. The writers' organization PEN America said on Tuesday. Penn compiled a database of banned books that includes the first novel by Nobel Prize winner Toni Morrison and a memoir by actor and activist George Takei, I think that's how you pronounce his name, about being sent to an internment camp in California as a Japanese American child during World War II. Challenges to books, specifically books by non-white male authors, are happening at the highest rates we've ever seen. Jonathan Friedman, the director of PEN America's Free Expression Program, said, what is happening in this country in terms of banning books in schools is unparalleled in its frequency, intensity, and success. He also said, in recent months, conservative parents have addressed school board meetings in numerous states to assail books they view as sexually explicit or as addressing racism in a way to make white children feel bad about themselves. Penn found that 86 school districts had removed 1,145 titles from their shelves over the last 9 months, some permanently, and others while an investigation was underway. More than 2/3 of the banned books were fiction, but nonfiction titles, including biographies for children of Rosa Parks, Martin Luther King, Duke Ellington, and Nelson Mandela, were also among those removed from shelves in school curricula. 5 poetry books were also banned. 4 in 10 removals were tied to political pressure in 8 school districts in Texas, South Carolina, and Georgia, the report said. Wow. For me, books in libraries, and were my home, a place where I could go to learn about new places, people, culture, ideas, and even find some humor, joy, sadness, and compassion. A treasure trove that is open to everyone. A library is a place where many successful authors and people found what they needed to prosper. That's my commercial. I could also include a few items from the Library Bill of Rights. I can find it here. I've got it somewhere. Okay, here's what the Library Bill of Rights says, and this comes from the American Library Association. American Library Association affirms that all libraries are forums for information and ideas, and that the following basic policies should guide their services. Books and other library resources should be provided for the interest, information, and enlightenment of all people of the community the library serves. Materials should not be excluded because of the origin, background, or views of those contributing to their creation. Libraries should provide materials and information presenting all points of view on current and historical issues. Materials should not be proscribed or removed because of partisan or doctrinal disapproval. Libraries should challenge censorship in the fulfillment of their responsibility to provide information and enlightenment. Libraries should cooperate with all persons and groups concerned with resisting abridgment of free expression and free access to ideas. A person's right to use a library should not be denied or abridged because of origin, age, background, or views. Libraries should make exhibit spaces and meeting rooms available to the public they serve and should make these facilities available on an equitable basis, regardless of the beliefs or affiliations of individuals or groups requesting their use. I could go on and read all kinds of stuff here about the freedom to read and everything else, but just wanted to know. Any questions? I'm kind of hoarse, so. No questions? I can't believe that.
Linda, I don't know that this is a question, but I've seen some news reports that some school libraries in particular are pulling books kind of in, what's the word I'm looking for? In anticipation that there's going to be a complaint. It just scares me.
Wow, that's scary. Wow.
When I was in Colorado Springs, I taught in District 20, which had this strange conglomeration of the Air Force Academy, lots of educated parents there, and focus on the family. And they were often at pretty direct odds, but I taught in a middle school, and every single week we got a list of books that were specifically designed to look like they were coming from specific groups, but they really did originate with focus on the family, but they handed them out so that they didn't look like they were all coming from them. And focus on the family has lots of great things they do, so I'm not downplaying them on other things, but any book that had the word witch in it, there were just so many things that were so ridiculous. And so we had a committee, we had a time frame, I don't remember what it was, that we had to read. The committee, much like what you talked about, Linda, made of parents, of teachers, of administrators, of a group of people, read the book, came back together. I think we had 10 days to read it and made the decision. Rarely did they decide to exclude the book from the library, but it was a very, very time-consuming task. And then it wasn't long until they complained that the committee was stacked and that it was not a fair committee. So then they started having to rotate that, which involved reteaching people what they were supposed to do. It was just awful from the standpoint of how much time it took away from the things that we felt like we should be doing and wanted to be doing at school. I don't know what's happened to that in the meantime. I thought I should contact people there and see if it has stayed like that, if it's different, if it's worse. I don't know. I remember thinking, if we hang in there, eventually this will stop, but it didn't seem like it was ever going to stop, because there is a never-ending supply of new books that have some kind of subject that people are going to object to.
When was this, Judy? What years?
I left there, let's see, I've lived here since 2001, and my last, so that was from about 1987 to 1998.
Good grief.
Yeah. And very, very, very organized. It wasn't just, a parent who objected, which to me seems more legit. It was an organization, a big, worldwide influential organization that objected. So.
Oh, wow. That's scary.
Yep.
But those groups are still organized, and even more so nowadays. It's just, it's kind of mushroomed, ballooned, all over the place. Anyone else have any questions or comments?
Linda, could you remind us when you were, your years when you were at the Hastings Public Library?
1976 to 2008.
When I was on that committee that you referenced, Linda, that's the first time I'd ever heard of of an attempt to ban a book in a public library. I was so naive. And then I ended up being on that committee, and it was so enlightening to see the care that was taken in looking at the complaint and figuring out, what to do next. It was a good experience, but I'd hate to think that it's an experience that has to happen every whip stitch.
Well, I think libraries are very sensitive to the fact that that happens. And as we did when I was there, you want to take every opportunity to treat it with kid gloves and make sure that you aren't, just kind of dismissing it to the person who's really objecting, because they have their ideas too, and you need to respect them and what they're concerned about. So yeah, I think libraries are very into this, and I think it's really pathetic that some libraries or some librarians are actually being fired for adhering to those kinds of principles, and that's a travesty, I think.
I agree.
I just remembered, oftentimes the parent who presented the objection to a book had not read the book.
Oh yeah, that was very often the
yeah.
case in many cases.
Yeah.
No, someone said this. Well, just like Waldo, one person saw the bare-breasted women and whoa, who'd even heard of Waldo before then? Not many people didn't. So yeah, it's nuts.
I have a question. Do you think that it's becoming even more common in the school system than in the public libraries? As
Oh, yes.
far as people
Yeah.
trying to
I do.
censor? I mean, that's my feeling, but I mean that the schools are challenged with even more of a problem than the public libraries.
Right. And that's why I think a lot of school boards are being bombarded with this situation. Yeah, it's like I say, mushroomed.
Linda, what's the procedure for taking a book off a banned list? Is that a local regulation? How long does a group need to wait after a book is banned before removing that designation? Are there guidelines there?
I don't think there are. I think it depends on the individual institution, whether
the
it's
local
a
area.
school or public. Yeah. And sometimes the books are kind of well, and like I said, there many times when they're banned, and they become notoriety, and people are then asking for them, and those libraries that haven't actually taken them off the shelves are deluged with requests for interlibrary loans. We want to see this book. What's it all about? And read it for themselves, which is good. I think that's great.
Linda, excuse me.
Yeah, okay, fellas.
Back in the day, could somebody request that you subscribe to a periodical and like say Hustler or Playboy? Did you get that kind of request, and how did you deal with those?
Wow, I don't think we ever got that kind of request. Probably we got the request the other way, that a periodical or something would be taken off. I mean, but we never did. That's an interesting adverse problem, you might say.
So Linda, if a book is banned through, say, the Hastings Public Library,
Right.
then it goes on to a national book ban?
Yes, yes.
Okay. And so then anybody,
American Library Association,
okay,
my intellectual freedom department, they keep track of all books that are being questioned, banned, prohibited, whatever you want to call it.
I
And
never thought about that.
yeah, they've been doing that. Well, I've been a librarian I was a librarian, or am, I'm always a librarian for years. So I would say they've been doing that at least since the 60s.
Okay. So
90s.
that just means that if somebody in California doesn't like the fact that Hastings Public Library banned a book, they can go through the process possibly of getting that back on the shelves. Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, Linda, I was always grateful. I remember the first time I worked with you, I was at Hastings Family Planning, and you were always so open to, we were promoting some books and materials, and you were always open-minded to it. I never felt like, you always just made me feel like people need to know this information, and I never got a feel for how you stood for any of it. So I was always so appreciative of that. And I'm also appreciative of other librarians always and the work that you do. So thank you.
I remember one time when I was writing this kind of a weekly article, I did a lot of them for the Tribune. I had written a book, or I had written the article about, I think I wrote it about gays, about gay books or something like that, pretty sure. And I actually got a note from somebody, from a gay person, who was so appreciative of that article. It just, and I never really got any negative comments about it. Maybe they just were afraid to speak up. Anything else, guys?
Did you do any weeding or thinning out of the videos and books and things that were donated to the public library or for the sale?
Oh, well, yeah, we weeded. Did we? I don't know. We probably looked at them to see if a good copy could replace our worn copy. That was one of our criteria, of course. And we did that a lot because some of the new ones that came in were in much better shape than our copies. But whether we actually went through and didn't put stuff in the sale that were a little bit more controversial, I don't think we didn't censor. It was there. It was a public book sale, so whatever you wanted. And I would suppose that people who had books that were a little bit controversial, they wanted to keep themselves. Perhaps, I don't know. Yeah, no, we never did that. That's a good question. Anything else? Another
Do
question.
you think at one stage that another funny memory, when I was 12 years old, I went to the library in Neely, Nebraska. Miss Selray was our little maiden. I think she was in her late 60s librarian. And she told me I could not check out Gone with the Wind. It's the first time I remember being openly defiant to an adult, because I said to her, my mom and dad will come back with me later today and get that book for me. And she just kind of, when I left, my mom and dad went back and got it for me later that day. And I remember thinking that went well, but I wasn't positive it would as I was walking home, because I thought it must be a really bad book if I can't check it out. But it was on the shelves directly behind her tall desk at the entrance to the library, where kids could not find it. So because I had asked for it, I said, do you have this library in the book? And she said, yes, but you cannot check it out. And I was 12, so maybe librarians have changed their mind too. That was a very long time ago.
Oh, yes.
Judy,
Yeah.
I'm laughing so hard because here I am, another Judy, my maiden librarian named Harriet wouldn't let me check out the same book.
Oh,
But I wasn't sassy like you. I didn't speak up and say my parents. I just was like, oh, okay.
oh. And then my very first year of teaching, the book Flowers for Algernon
Oh,
was
yeah.
on the reading list for my students. And I was shocked because the school board said you can't teach that book. And I said, well, we've already bought them. So they made me staple 12 pages together. Well, if that isn't an indicator to high school kids that you want to be sure to take those staples out and read these pages, I just thought that was a ridiculous thing to do,
Man.
One of the things that confuses me so much about the book banning attempts that are happening right now is that parents or whomever are worried that the children will be made to feel badly about themselves. That is such a confusing concept to me. Anyway, that's all I'm going to say about that.
Well, and that critical race theory is controversial right now, which is what you're talking about. But
Mhm.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's
Well,
not
Judy-
even being taught in any place that they're talking about. So
Judy Hall.
Yes.
This book called Ban This Book. It's kind of a book about you, I guess, because this young girl, she's only a fourth grader, but she goes to the library wants to check out the school library and wants to check out what is her favorite book? The Mixed Up Files of Mrs. Basil T. Franklin.
Oh, yes.
She wants to check that book out, and the librarian says, "Oh no, it's you can't check it out. It's not here anymore, or you can't check it out. It's been banned." And she's so upset because that's her favorite book. So she goes home and she convinces her parents to let her go to the bookstore and buy the book.
Oh.
So she goes that way around. Well, then eventually she finds out that other kids are wanting to read some of the same books that she does. She starts this little banned book library in her locker at school and starts checking out all these books. And people are giving her books that, this is my favorite. And so she started making little cards and pockets for her books so she could keep track of who had what. But it is just hysterical.
Well, that's fun. And it's called Ban This Book.
Ban This Book.
Okay, I'll have to look for that.
Yeah, it's cool. And then eventually she goes to the school board and, she's supposed to speak up about the book and she wimps out. She's too scared to speak in front of all these adults. But then eventually she gets caught, you might say. The school principal realizes what she's doing and so she's suspended from school. Well, that's really bad. And then some of her friends who've been in this with her have been supplying her with books and say, "Hey, we can't have this stop," So they go to the library and start checking out all kinds of books and finding some things that are wrong with them. For example, The Magic Tree House. Oh, hey, this doesn't abide by the building code. It has no rails here, and all kinds of silly things like that. And they write up these requests for removal from the library with the comments, and they've got thousands of books from the library. And so all of these kids come to the school board meeting and present this to the school board. Well, obviously, all the banned books are then put back on the shelf. And the librarian, who was at that point fired, is reinstated. So, but yeah, it's really a terrific book. Gives you a good perspective.
Well, and about kids being empowered, which is great, isn't it?
Oh yeah. That was the greatest part about it.
Yeah.
She just took it upon herself, little fourth grader.
And, it's fun to look at the ridiculousness and whatnot, but it raises a serious point that we need to be very alert about the possibilities of book bannings locally.
I think so, yeah. Too.
I had an experience when Hastings Public Library was celebrating its 25th anniversary, I believe. And you all got a bunch of books that were signed by authors and then had an auction at the library there for us to come and bid on the books as a way of raising money. And this is during the early days of the AIDS crisis.
Yes.
And there was a book that was coming out that John Kenneth Galbraith had written, and I was a fan of his. And he'd signed, so I wanted to get it. So I came, and among the books that was up for auction was "And the Band Played On" by Randy Schultz. And I just happened to have read a review of it at the hairdressers. Just happened to. So that book comes up, and nobody will bid on it. The black mark of being about AIDS and homosexuality, nobody in the audience at Hastings Library for a fundraiser would dare bid on the book. And I read the review and it was very positive. I thought, well, to heck with this. And I bid for it for $10. And I ended up getting a signed book from Randy Schultz that was a $25 book, brand new, for $10, because it was okay, I guess, for me as a doctor to be wanting to read about something about AIDS, but nobody else had the courage or the gumption or the interest to bid on that book.
I guess I wasn't there.
No, you weren't, Judy. I still have the book, and it was a very, very good book.
It is good.
But it was certainly the problem with public opinion and what other people think of me if I bid on that book.
And Phyllis, I actually do remember that very incident, and that you were the purchaser.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really, really, what?
Telling.
Telling.
Uh-huh.
It was very brave of you, I guess.
Thank you.
It's cool.
So what are things or ways that, I think, am I muted? No. What are
No.
ways that we can get involved to be part of this process? How are people selected that are part of that process to review books?
Well, I know the public library has a specific, designation in terms of, we want to get people who are from different parts of the community. And so normally they select people from the school and the college, people from the media, people from the general public. And how they select those, I don't know. Just kind of look for somebody. And I suppose you could put yourself as one of those people if they were doing that and needed someone from the general public that you would be willing to serve on such a committee. So, and let's hope that there's not a lot of instances where that's going to be called for.
The other thing, the reason for banning books is it makes kids feel bad. I think that there are probably some things that we need to feel bad about.
Oh, you bet.
And I'm really struck with what you said about the withholding one group's history
Yes.
from another group because it's painful.
Well, there are many things in life that are painful, but we
Right.
can't avoid them. They don't go away. They're there. And I think the more you learn about them, the more you kind of empathize with the people. And if you're going through the same feeling, that's good too. So, yeah, that's.
The other thing that's a problem is that I think may come up in the next elections across the country is people trying to get elected to school boards and stuff so that they can impose their concerns on people who differ from them. And I know that there are people who say, well, it should be the parents who are teaching their children this. And when I used to do So You're Growing Up, there were sometimes people who thought that we should cover certain topics, but the problem is the people who want the parents to do it, the very parents who need it to do it the most, don't do it. And the kids won't get information they desperately need if it's not given in some of the forums that we have and through the schools. It won't happen because they're too uncomfortable with it. They simply don't want to have to tell their daughters about periods and things like that. So they just don't do it.
So Minden had that issue in the last election.
Well, Phyllis, to kind of emphasize what you said, I'm one of those parents who didn't want to do it. I appreciated So You're Growing Up so much.
I think the other point there is that if they really want to restrict the information that their children have that much, then perhaps public school is not where they should be.
Perhaps, right.
Public school is about that information being there. And those people they want the public school to be their private school.
Yes.
They don't want to put the work or the money into having their children educated. They want someone to do it for them, but they want to limit the information that is available to everyone.
Yeah, very true. Very much. Anything else? Been a good discussion. Thank you all.
Thank you, Linda.
Thank you so much, Linda. You did an awful lot of research and using your experience, and thank you so much.
Okay.
But one of the things that I just wondered is in that some places in Adams County have quite a few people running for school board. Would it be an appropriate forum for school board members eventually, where this was one of the questions we asked them?
If there were a forum, right, but I don't think there's going to be one for the primary, but perhaps for the general.
Maybe for the general, yeah. And I have a little bit awareness of this. Let's see, I'm going to be careful what I share. From when I called people who had not shared their email address
Oh,
for Vote 411
okay.
and talked with them, and some of them had many questions about why did we need it, all kinds of things like that. I was very surprised.
Oh, wow.
And some expressions of why they did not want to share it. They didn't want to hear from people about this or that, or that kind of thing. And there are people out there who are running for reasons that would be very objectionable to me. And I'm not sure I would know that.
Right.
If I might share, I learned at a meeting last night that the Hastings Education Association is going to host a forum. And they didn't have an exact date or time or place, but it sounds like the HEA will try to bring some of that to the forefront.
That's
And
good.
I think, excuse me, Judy, just a minute. I think there's also at least a discussion in the legislature now about when a person is going to be a candidate, that they need to submit their email.
Yeah, it
That was
hasn't
the-
passed.
That was a bill brought by the League of Women Voters of Nebraska.
Oh,
And for the sole purpose of having the email for vote411.org.
and what's its status, Elaine, do you know?
Just like Judy said, it hadn't gone anywhere.
No.
Oh, okay, sorry. I was hopeful when I read that. Okay, I interrupted somebody, sorry about that. Okay. Who did I interrupt? Sorry.
I think you thought you interrupted me, but you did not, Linda.
Oh,
I just
okay.
was shaking my head and agreeing.
Okay. Okay, anything else? This has been terrific. Thank you all for your comments and questions.
Thank you.
And contributions. Great. Okay.